Good morning. My name is Dr. Arun Upneja, Dean of the School of Hospitality Administration, or SHA, at Boston University. On behalf of the students, faculty, and staff, a warm welcome to everyone attending the fourth in our Distinguished Speaker Series of 2021. We have a couple more events sprinkled throughout the semester. In particular, I want to highlight the next week, March 26th, as we are hosting our long-standing Leadership Summit. We'll kick that off on March 26th with a keynote address by Peter Greenberg, who is an Emmy-winning investigative reporter and producer from CBS News. He'll talk about leadership and how the hospitality companies are doing in leadership with respect to leadership. We'll follow that up with our Icon of the Industry Award to legendary restaurant Danny Meyer. He is the founder and CEO of Union Square Hospitality. Be sure to visit the School of Hospitality website for all of these events. We would love to see you for all of them. Before I introduce our moderator today, please know that we welcome your questions. In the chat box, feel free to write down your questions addressed to Professor Leora Lance. And if there is time at the end, we'll be happy to ask them to the chef on your behalf. So today, it's my pleasure to introduce Kealoha Pomerantz in conversation with Douglas Williams, owner chef of MIDA. Kealoha was graduated from School of Hospitality at BU. She was part of the inaugural class of MMH, Master of Management in Hospitality, graduated in 2018. Since 2017, she has been working with as an operations and culture manager at Real Food Hospitality Strategy and Design. She's also teaching a course in our master's program. But I think what she claims her best qualification to be in conversation with the chef is that she is a food lover. She grew up in her father's restaurants, and then she worked for Hillstone and R&D Kitchen. So she's going to be very excited to talk to the chef today. In addition, I also want to mention that on Monday, we will be formally announcing, and you're hearing this today, that we are adding a new concentration to our MMH program, which is Restaurant Management and Experiences. We'll have courses in operations, business, entrepreneurship, and innovation. We are proud to launch this next year. Particularly, this is the time that our industry really needs innovation and to really think out of the box, how to get people back into the restaurants and how to create new experiences for them. Again, you can read all of that on our website. With this exciting news, I'm going to turn it over to Kealoha to have her conversation and to introduce Chef Douglas Williams.
Thank you so much, Dean Upneja. So good morning, everyone. My name is Kealoha Pomerantz, and it is a very large pleasure and honor for me to introduce our guest today. So Douglas Williams is the chef and owner of MIDA, Boston. He is a Food and Wine Best New Chef for 2020 and a James Beard Foundation Semi-Finalist for Best Chef Northeast, which is a huge honor. He's known for his deft technique with handmade pasta, his generous hospitality, and a smile and spirit that will light up the room, as I'm sure we'll see today. Williams is committed to making a difference in both the kitchen and the community. He was diagnosed with Crohn's disease as a teenager, so his path took a little bit of a left turn as he learned how to heal himself through food. His journey brought him from his hometown of Atlantic City, New Jersey, to culinary school, and then to traveling the world learning from the best. From Thailand to Paris, New York to Boston, he has worked and staged at some of the best restaurants, including Radius and Copa in Boston, Crohn in New York, and Akham in Paris. While cooking at Copa, Williams would cycle down Mass Avenue, where the South End meets Roxbury, and all he saw was opportunity for change and the chance to create something meaningful. At the corner of Tremont Street and Mass Ave, he created his first restaurant, MIDA, a neighborhood restaurant inspired by the simplicity of classic Italian culinary traditions. MIDA is one of the city's favorite restaurants, one of Leora's favorite restaurants, earning top honors for best restaurants in Boston and best pasta. It's certainly a must visit if you're in Boston or when you visit us again soon. Williams has shared that to be a Black chef and owner here in Boston is an honor and a responsibility that he takes very seriously. He says he's fortunate to have a successful restaurant, an incredible team, and a supportive community. He has things to say and share. He tries to do it every night through delicious and beautiful dishes at MIDA, and by giving his time and energy to the neighborhood and those around him. He puts a passion for storytelling and teaching to use by building bridges in the community through food and conversation, which is our title today. He believes that the world can come together over a delicious bowl of pasta. We can all get behind that. So Williams has a couple of new projects that we'll talk about today. A Beats, I hope I'm saying that right, is set to open in Hub Hall in Boston. And he's poised to open a new restaurant in Newton. So for anyone who lives there, we'll get exciting news about that. And that will be in the coming months. So as you can tell, an incredibly impressive guest. And so, Chef, I think I'd love to really just start by hearing a little bit about what your childhood was like in Atlantic City, and maybe how some of those elements from your early life, I know your parents both worked in restaurants, how those have sort of helped shape who you've become today.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, and hello to everybody. And I hope you have plenty of questions for me at the end. And I think, Kealoha, you also made up a new award as city's favorite restaurant, which I think you might want to take.
That's from us to you. We're giving that to you.
I love it. But let me just frame it up a little bit, because I don't know if everyone or most people on this call have been to Atlantic City, New Jersey. Have been on the South Shore, or should we say the Jersey Shore, and obviously not through the TV show lens, but if you've been to Wildwood, if you've been to Ocean City, Summers Point, all those lovely, Jersey Shore towns that don't have that sort of weird stigma to them. They have this life to them, this childhood sense of just wonderment to it. There's Ferris wheels and fried dough and lovely things. I grew up 2 blocks from the beach, and that may sound like I grew up with some sort of some money, but actually you didn't need to have money in order to live directly next to the beach in Atlantic City, which was a very interesting dynamic, because there was so much money on the boardwalk that even 1 block off, there was complete despair. Just that far, just that close to something that was so ritzy, and millions of dollars, many hundreds of millions of dollars coming into casinos, when just 200 feet away, there was no construction, no good things happening, especially for development or economy. So it's very interesting, because that is a very applicable to some of Boston's neighborhoods, right? Especially when you just mentioned about the South End in relation to, Roxbury. 200 feet over, there's a completely different city happening, completely different demographic, socioeconomic situations. It had a very interesting mirror to, my childhood. My mother came to Atlantic City, New Jersey, from Pennsylvania, for the opportunity, as did many, to work in the casino in, I want to say, 91. That's when her first casino opened, but she came here in about 82. Met my father. They were working in a restaurant at that time, and they met, and we know what happened. And I appeared, and my mother needed to figure something out, and thankfully, the casinos were opening up. Harris and Trump Taj and all this money was coming to the city, an opportunity. So she, got on that, as did my father, and tried to make something happen. And within the household, my father obviously knew how to cook, and he was a professionally trained chef. And my mother, obviously had a very interesting dynamic with herself, because she was of Syrian Lebanese descent. But in 84, 82, the civil war was happening in Syria, or was actually starting to ramp up. So it was quite dangerous to go back home. So there was no chance to go back and connect with who I was, who she was, to learn the language, to really meet our family. And that was done through pictures and through food. And that was the only way that she knew how to connect those worlds. So you have, obviously the father in a professional sense, and my mother trying to connect me with food and through culture, in her own way, but also being, tied down with full-time job and the difficulty of financial situations. And thankfully, there was a lot of love in my household, and I was able to accept the things that were life. And when you're a child, you really don't see, a lot of the things that parents try to shield you from. But thankfully, a lot of that was food, and through a very big family. And there was through my father's side, which I had a huge Black and Pentecostal family that, showered me with love, and thankfully with food, and through stories and culture. So that's essentially what was like growing up. And tons of fried dough. I forgot, I mentioned the fried dough, but I actually did consume a lot of that, and pizza, because that is the life when you're living a few blocks from the boardwalk. Is your life is the boardwalk and the beach. So I am definitely a water beach baby, for sure.
We'll get you a shirt, body by fried dough, by pizza, just by dough in general. So
you're just coming up with all of them today. You're full of it today. I love it.
It's the Shaw line. Did having, those food experiences sort of drive your passion, or was your, going into culinary school sort of a path you cut for yourself? Like, did that feel sort of separate from your father having gone to culinary school?
Yeah, I mean, it's when you're between 5 and 13, you're just trying to make sure you survive school, right? You're just trying to like get a good haircut and have some decent clothes, and just make it personally, right? So I think that was more of the focus, and make sure you're bringing home decent grades. And I think that was really where it was. But as far as cooking, that was never, no one really told me about professional life. That was not a conversation. We didn't talk much about college. My father didn't go to college. My mother didn't go to college. I wasn't necessarily set up to do that financially, or just with perception of that and perspective. So it was more or less just making sure mom was okay. You have to understand too, at that time, during that moment when I was 10, my mom got diagnosed with cancer. She had a double mastectomy, lymph nodes, the whole nine. So my perception of life became not just about survival, but about preservation of who I was, and our tight knit situation that we had going on. So that was more or less my focus. The time that the switch came when I was 15. In New Jersey, you were able to work somewhat early. Actually, 14, I think, was our earliest working age, and driving was actually 15, which was great. Which is with no accompaniment. So that was amazing. And I got a job at Wendy's when I was 15, and as a summer job. And I thought that was the most amazing, still to this day. Before I opened my restaurant, I was still putting in Wendy's on my resume. That was extreme, and not out of being cliche or ironic or to be funny per se, even though it was, as was told to me very squarely to my face. But I did it as I reassured whoever was reading that resume and who was interviewing me, that was a very formative time. Even though it's seen as a fast food thing, there are systems in that organization that are leaked into every other food world that we know and that we consume, including my restaurant. And I think that's incredibly important to talk about and to discuss, and realize that you can make, especially if you're just getting into this job field or you're getting into the professional world, and you're able to take something that someone sees as, ironic or a little corny, and make it into the foundation and the pillar in which you stand on, and which you base your personality on, and your systems and your processes. I think that they start to take that an employer would see that as being taken more seriously, and that I would actually respect that person for being able to grab such a large chunk out of a very small, or what's seen as a small part of someone's life, especially their first job. No one really puts that on. No one that I know puts that on their resume. Maybe externships, yes, but not necessarily a fast food concept. So I try to bring that to who I am, and carry that on. And I bring up the pillar part, because I opened MIDA with the pillar of generosity, right? MIDA, as everyone may know by now with all the interviews, is, MIDA means she gives me, or he gives me. And that's been translated directly to generosity. And I think and that goes directly back through all my experience, whether it be Paris or Thailand, other continents, other parts of the world, the best chefs, it doesn't matter the kitchen. I always go back to, the pillar of Wendy's. And does everyone, or do you know, Chloe, why, Dave Thomas makes his burger square?
Oh, I knew this story, but I forgot it. But
okay,
tell
good.
us.
You're a good sport. Because Dave Thomas doesn't like to cut corners. And when you have that as it, I know it's so funny, but it's so real that it really stays with me until this day, until this moment, until we're having a lecture series and I'm bringing that up. It really resonates. And I want, everyone to as they come out of college and as they come out of, a postgrad, that hold on to those things and apply them later in life. And you never know how they're going to apply to your own business or your own entrepreneurial spirit. And even if you're not an entrepreneur, if you're a part of a company and you bring that, I think that holds and that rings true.
That's huge. I love that. It's a physical manifestation, right? It's sort of like the image of your hands, right? These things that are so telling.
So that's how, to answer your question, that's how I essentially turn the switch into being of food and not knowing that I can have a professional life out of it, and not being in that space or having those mentors to know that, and then grabbing onto what I thought was a great concept and great structure and great processes and applying that to how I want to move through the industry, and therefore also bring in the entrepreneurial spirit, and combine that into something great in the future.
That's great. I was pretty young to know that, 15.
It's easier in retrospect to cut out all of the little pieces that you're confused on, but you know what I mean. It all makes sense at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So I know that you were, talking about your mother's health and sort of where you were at the age when you were in culinary school. You were also, of course, immersed in food, but not really able to eat it because of Crohn's disease at the time. So I just wondered, sort of almost Crohn's as metaphor for any challenge, really what your approach was to dealing with that obstacle, how it maybe informed you as a chef, and just sort of, how you've come out the better for it. You're well and have a restaurant, and they seem sort of like they wouldn't be able to coexist, but they have for you.
Yeah, I think they kind of have to. I didn't really see any other way, because for me, and I bring up the survival piece again, because like I said, there was no option. I have no, even now I have no accounting degree to fall back on, right? I have no publishing experience. I have no other internship other than food and other than that. So if I don't make it, then I don't live and I don't survive and I don't meet the woman of my life and have the kids of my dreams. And so I saw, once I turned 19, 18, I said, oh crap, I can't go do anything else. I have to give 1000% of myself and go as far as I can and go as deep as I can and self-educate myself as much as I can. Even beyond culinary school, because culinary school, I couldn't wait to get out. Not because I didn't like it, but because, the books I was reading and the people I was talking to, they said that is such a small, not insignificant, obviously important and foundational, but in the aspect of your entire career, it is the, kind of the holding of the slingshot, right? You're not out of the gate yet. Once you get out, there's a whole vast expansive thing, but you need that initial pull to launch you. And but everything after that is so dangerous and so risky and but it all depends on how serious you take it. And a lot of people who depend just on college as their sword that gets them through the battles are not usually going to make it, right? Especially if you're going into entrepreneurship. So I use that as a tool to get through, but there's so much to talk about.
Tell us everything.
Yeah. So yeah, I just use that as a tool, but I tried to really just get through what I could with the experience that I had and keep on fighting and not be scared of risk. I think risk was probably when you have no real formal education, right? When you have no savings to depend on, when you have a health condition yourself, when your mom is also essentially, once you have cancer, it's very hard to get out of that. When you're in your older age. My mom was 40 when she had me, by the way. So by the time she got cancer, she was 50. And then you talk about 10 years after that, you know, going into culinary school, she was almost 60. So I knew that life was very fragile at that point, right? I knew that she was, as she would famously say, she's going in for a soft landing or a smooth landing, which was incredibly sad, but incredibly reassuring, and gave me almost a ticking clock to get my, excuse my French, but my shit together, right? And there is no, like I said, I have the professional, I don't have the professional net to catch me. I don't have the life net to catch me. And I have my why, right? At the end of the day, that's what I had. I had my why in hand, and I knew that. I didn't just have it and wasn't conscious of it. I had it, and I also knew it. And while that is a lot of pressure and quite scary and a lot of stress, that point, that knowing that and realizing that and understanding that mom was probably not going to make it out of this, and that I didn't have any other way out of it professionally, that I had to stick with it and I had to give it my all, actually made me realize, and was a turning point for my Crohn's disease, because I was about 27. I was just about to come from Paris. Mom was in her last year of life. And I knew that this was a turning point, but I also realized that it wasn't the food that was making me sick. This whole time I thought it was food that was making me sick. The medicine is the only thing that can help. The food will make you sick, and that's all I knew. And then I realized it was the stress, or the not having the ability to manage stress. It was the management of stress. And when I say stress, I don't mean just stress at work, because kitchen stress is not life stress to me. That was actually my release from life. That was actually my escape, as it is for many people who are in the hospitality industry. We're all a little damaged in our own, and yeah, a little bit, and we have our reasons, and we don't always know how to work them out, and always know how to do it. But that's why a lot of us get into the hospitality industry, because we don't need certain qualifications. We don't need perfect grades. Actually, the worse grades you have, the better, because that means you can figure, you have the other brain, which you need both to run a restaurant, but I digress. And once I realized it was stress that was making me sick, because we all think about it, when we get a headache, when we have a pain, if we have a chronic disease, if something in us, if we have even a break our leg, what's the first thing we want to do is lay down and relax and take our mind away. And when I thought about that, and I remember I was in Paris, I was sitting in my small apartment, and I was thinking about I was having a little, what we call flare up, which is just an increase in inflammation. And I thought, I ate that thing again. I knew I shouldn't have ate that. And then I realized, I said, you know what, I'm just going to relax. And I'm just going to calm down and take my mind somewhere else. And I always take my mind on a plane, right? My mind is always I fly through the clouds. That's the most peaceful place to be. You have less gravity, you have less everything. Everything just feels a little more at peace. You feel like you're floating. And I try to do that. And I started to practice that. And it wasn't meditation per se, in my opinion. It was just a getaway. And once I did that, my body I was actually able to calm myself when I got inflammation. And I realized it wasn't the medicine that was keeping me healthy, and it wasn't the food that was making me sick. It was actually my damage from my father leaving when I was 6, and the confusion of him coming back when I was 15, and how to deal with that. My mother being sick at an early age, and life being lost, and all these things that we all go through. We all have our own combination of things, but we don't all deal with them, and not all of us have access or the insight to get a person to talk to about it, a therapist. So it was actually all of my life that was internalizing. And they say when you have stress, or when you are a stressful person, it goes to the weakest part of your body, right? The softest tissue, the point that's most at risk in your body. And that's where your stress focuses on, and then it manifests into something not so great. And once I realized that, once I started reading and understanding of it, I was actually able to go into remission. By my body's, obviously, I didn't just flip a switch. My body decided that with better diet and better stress management, and letting go of the things that I couldn't control. So once I did that, my whole professional life was able to excel. the release of my mother, the release of certain things from my past that I can't control. And it was able to propel me into right now.
That is incredible. This is a motivational speaker right here. This should be a class for owners. It's incredible. I don't think most people are able to have that much insight. So you spoke a lot about yourself, as a young child, and about, how much your childhood impacted you. And now we've sort of come full circle in that you mentioned you have the two little lights of your life, twin, young, adorable boys, which I can imagine may add to stress and take away stress. So I just would love to, this is a topic that has been discussed at length, people in the hospitality industry having children, but how has that been for you? Has it changed your perspective as an owner, as a chef?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's something that I wanted since I was 12. I remember at 12 years old was about that time that I started understanding about kids. Obviously your body starts to change yourself, and I knew that being a father was something that I wanted to do at some point, and 2 kids was actually what I wanted. I didn't know how it was all gonna come together, but it came together. And the child thing is interesting, because if you have 2 at one time, you actually have 0 time. You actually have less than 0 time. Even though having 2 children is only 50% harder. When you have them at the same time, it's only 50% harder, and not 100% harder, because you have efficiencies and things that that work themselves out. But in relation to the industry, it's crap. It's awful. It's not fun to have children at really any age that you have to work still full time. And that's even if you have a partner to help you. And we couldn't do it ourselves. So we had to get an au pair. We had to get, babysitters, and we had to do all those things. But if anything, it's inspirational, and it drives me to do more. They need school now, and they need things, and they need more. I need to make more money. So that drives, same way that, my past drove me to do certain things and make certain decisions. Having children and having a life now increases, my rate of needing to do other things in order to afford that. So it's funny how life drives your decisions, even though you think you are driving them. Your life, it's just how you respond to it, and who you talk to and who you're discussing it with, and you'd be surprised who comes up with answers with you and for you. So
yeah, definitely. That's great. You're a new reason. I mean, I'm sure they're too tiny to be proud of you, but they will be soon.
Yeah, well, they can actually cook almost as good as me now. They make their breakfast every single day themselves, and they like butter a lot. So that's great.
Good French chefs, French trained chefs. So, also, and I know you've spoken about this at length on other interviews, as much as Crohn's disease was sort of an invisible, maybe impactor, or, had an impact on your life, race is something I think that has been discussed. And I mentioned it even in your bio, a quote from yourself, feeling a responsibility as, one of too few in the country, Black chefs and owners, but especially in Boston. So, I'd just love to hear a little bit more about what that responsibility feels like, or what it's been like for you to sort of carve a path that was less representative of your, background.
Sure. Well, I would have to take it, back to training, because I think that's kind of how it originated, and that sets your mind on who I am today, right? So, with the training piece, going into a kitchen, for me, it was all about wonderment, right? It was just the first time you walk into a huge fair, it's just you see this and you see that moving, you see the slides, and you see kids, you see candy, you see food. It's just a lot to handle. So you're just so head down. There's no mirrors in there, right? You don't know what you just see people yelling at you and pissed that you're not moving fast enough, and sharp knives. And there's no time. For me, there was never any time to say, oh, there's not another Black guy here, or there's not another Black woman here. I just saw, and also there's another language happening, Spanish mostly happening in the kitchen. So I was trying to absorb so much for the first, even to this day, there's still so much to absorb. But looking back when I first started, it was just, I just didn't want to get fired, right? I just wanted to make sure they were happy with my performance, not based on who I was. And if there was ever, and then thankfully, there never was any sort of bias or feeling. Being in New Jersey, I wasn't, there was so much mix of people. Italians, I mean, if it's anything, Italians got the most flack for being who they were and their culture. And even though that was the most popular food, if not in the world, that was more or less that. I never got a sense of discrimination in a kitchen ever in my life. And if there was, I was determined to run directly over it and not just prove to them, but just show them that whatever mindset that they are in is totally ridiculous, and makes no sense, and is an entire waste of time on their end and on mine. So you should probably catch up with me and try to keep up, right? Because that's really what it's about. It's just about competition. I used to run track in high school, as an intermediary of what I wanted to do. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but running track, and my family was fast and we have great genes, and that's what I did. So, but I knew I wanted to keep 2 to 3 things when I went into whatever profession I chose when I was 17, was competition, because I just needed to be competitive. I needed to move, right, as another piece, and I needed to teach. Those 3 things are non-negotiables to have a part of my career, right? And I think people on this call, or students on this call, and faculty and everyone, if you're coming up with a new business, or if you want to work for a firm, or if you want to, wherever you may want to go, in any straight of the hospitality industry, because there's so much, not just in the kitchen, not just owning a restaurant, not just having a vineyard, not just being a bottler or distributor. I mean, there's so much to do. You have to have certain non-negotiables that you want to be a part of either your job, career, or your business enterprise. Because if you don't have those pieces, there's nothing to tie yourself to. And this takes me back to pillars, right? You have to have those things that make you happy in the day, because it's going to get really, really shitty, right? At some point, it's going to be really not fun. At most 90% of the time, it's not that fun, and not even fun, but just not even enjoyable.
No.
And you have to, at the end of the night, it's just you and your pillow, right? It's just you and your mind deciding whether this is something you want to continue with, whether you want to drag on, whether you need more money. And at the end of the day, I never have asked for a raise in my entire life. I've never desired another raise, because it wasn't about the raise. It was about my performance. And my performance would, at the end of the day, provide me with my lifestyle and the things that I need. And when I realized that it couldn't, I did the entrepreneur thing. That was my next leap. And that usually is people's next leap when they feel like they are so frustrated and want to move on into a new role, and they realize there is no role for that. There is no role for someone who wants to, not have skin in the game, but also have their own business. You can't do that. So you have to move into an entrepreneurship role. And that is the big leap. That is the leap without a safety net, the leap without a parachute. And that's the kind of the mindset you need to have. And that's where I've been at, and I always will be at, because the dangers and the risks don't stop now. Now that I have a restaurant, okay, great, everyone loves it, it's all good. But now my kids need private school. Okay, great. Now, we need another home, and we need to get bigger. We're too big. We're like, yeah, it's tough. But you have to find those things that keep you grounded. Because like I said, most time it won't be all that enjoyable.
So what did that look like, sort of bringing MIDA about, that first, bricks and mortar, and how did those pillars really find a home, right? Generosity and other pillars in that space.
So coming back from Paris, like I said, there was a lot of things happening. I was just starting to learn my body. My mom was coming in for, her slow landing. And I knew that was all happening at the same time. But also my Deborah, my wife, was back in Boston. And she had stuck by me for 6-7 years and let me travel the world and do what I wanted and see what I want to see and enrich myself. So I feel like I owed it to her to come back there, and instead of going to New York, back to New York, or back to anywhere, just be in Boston. And I saw a ton of opportunity, as you said in the beginning of the call, that I would ride down Mass Ave and see the difference and see opportunity on the Roxbury side. I knew at that point, and I was in touch with a few of the local government officials. One very important one being Ayanna Presley. Ayanna Presley was my councilwoman at that time. This was 2014, 2015. She was District 7 Roxbury, Mattapan, Dorchester, all of that. And obviously everyone knows now that she's the hottest thing in the world, literally. You can't top that right now, which is incredible. And it's awesome when you see someone when they're here and then they turn into the sun. And that those guiding lights helped me realize that there were initiatives happening in Roxbury, right? For not just people of color, but for people who wanted to open businesses, and there still are. Liquor license available that haven't been available in 40 years. Cheaper rent, empty spaces, retail opportunities, everything. It was all, I just saw it. You see that when you see the signs in the windows, some people say, oh, there's not a lot happening, or there's like, that's a bad neighborhood. I just see opportunity. And I don't know how other people don't, but I also see a possibility for impact, right? Because when there's nothing happening and if you're in a dark room and the smallest light you shine, it can be a little match, it's gonna illuminate, right? So I saw that if I can just essentially spark my match and give it good bones and give it good foundation, come back to Boston, find a partner, find the money, and find a space. That's what I knew I needed. I knew I needed to separate the money and the partner, because when you have the partner and the money combined, the money will always lead, right? And it won't be in your self-interest. If your self-interests are in line with the partner, and the money is separate from other input, then his interest or her interests are your interests, and then you both can get to, essentially whatever your promised land is, and you keep the funding separate. So I wanted to make sure that was the case, and find a great space that meant something and that can tell a story. And and MIDA was closed for a long time. Sorry, it was called Clucket before, and it was kind of laughed at. But what they didn't realize is that it was 4,000 square feet. You thought it was 2,000 square feet in just the top, but then you realized it was an entire catacomb that mirrored the entire space of the restaurant, the floor of the restaurant underneath, that provided a huge amount of things. So I saw that. I saw the cheap rent was $6,000, which for a 4,000 square foot, I think it was, what's that? $45 a square foot. It's like nothing. It was bare bones. So you have that. You have the opportunity. You have motivation. You have determination. You have a frustration, because you need that. You kind of need that frustration piece to be burning inside of you. And realizations, all the uns, all the you need to be happening at the same time, for something magical to happen. But you also have to put a piece of yourself, a part of that business, and that's what I did, and that's why MIDA, in that space, 782 Tremont, played such a big part and such an important part, in why it makes sense. And we can talk about more, but that's why that came to fruition.
That's great. And how do you think, I know you're starting a couple of new things during I'm excited, during a time when everyone seems to be not thinking of growth, you are. How do you, what are they, first of all, if you can talk about them, those new ventures, and how do you bring those, right, all those realizations and your pillars into these new things?
Sure. Well, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but I think that most people actually think of stability. Right. I think most people are thinking of just making it and trying to figure out the next, because that's just that's a general mindset, and that's fair, and that's respectable. But for me, like I said, I don't have another way. I have to. If I'm not growing, then I'm actually sinking. Right. I think of it like quicksand. I have to actually be rising out, because you're not just sitting in quicksand. You are being sucked down. So I see it. That's my mindset. If I'm sitting still, if nothing new is happening, if I'm not, say, in the press, then I am slowly dwindling, and I have to be fighting for that next piece. So, when I apply it to my other businesses or things that I want to do, I'm not thinking of, is it unsafe or is it too risky, or is it not a good bet? It's really about timing. Timing is the thing I think I stress about the most, because a new business or a new venture, people are always going to be hungry. And a famous quote, I'm sure it probably even originated with you, is that hospitality never dies, right? It will never go away. War, famine, pandemic, anything. It never goes away, because that is and as we all seen this past year, we all have this, we don't know where it comes from, we don't know why it's in there, but this feeling to dine, not in our homes, in it with lovely service and with lovely food and with lovely hospitality. That's what we crave. We need that for ourselves, for our sanity. And just knowing that piece gives me the determination and the understanding that something needs to happen. I just need to make it appropriate to the times, and plan it well. And again, have the right partner and have the right investment partners as well, and the right space and the right city. And I think Newton, and I'll make this point that Newton is, in my opinion, prime to any city really wants more food, right? There's no city that doesn't. You want more options. You want more reasons to go out and places to celebrate your life and other people's lives. And with Newton, it's so close to the city. We have incredible landlords that we work with, market development, and not to mention that, I think Newton has a certain perception of it, has some optic about it, and that it's either mostly Jewish or mostly white or mostly this or mostly that. I don't see those things. I am, as you maybe know, I think you know, that I'm converted to Judaism a few years ago, before my boys were born, to create some cohesion in my life. And so that, and also I went to school with a lot of Jewish cultures. So, and a lot of mixed kids in general. So I never saw a town being this way, and therefore I'm not allowed in there. That never made sense to me. Even though it makes sense in the demographics and the history, it never made sense as far as regards to me. So I want to make sure that I don't let that stop my business. So I think that with Newton, whenever you go to a restaurant, be Newton or otherwise, when you walk in, you have a great time, you have a great meal, you're a little involved, you had a great time with friends, you walk out and you look out in this wonderment, and you look on this town, this city, wherever you are in this neighborhood, say, I can live here. Once you enjoy a restaurant, you really can live somewhere too, right? It's not that bad. Even if it's on a hillside in the middle of Spain, you know what, this is not so bad here. I think I can live around the couch, because when you're fed well, you can live well. And I think that rings true in Newton. I think it's going to ring true in Newton, and that will make people who see me either as a Black man, as a great chef, as a great person, as a motivator, whatever it may be. They come to the restaurant, whether they've been to Newton before, or whether they live there. Whether they've never been to Newton or whether they live there. I think that they're going to walk in, walk out, and say, I can be here, and a percentage of those people will end up doing that, and that will slowly change the perception. That will slowly change the demographic. That will slowly change how people respect the community and want to be a part of it and want to give something. Maybe they don't want to live there, but maybe they want to open a business there or want to open a rental property there. And that will, again, drive, traffic and drive economy and drive everything. So I think a restaurant has a responsibility in that way. And I want to be a part of that. So that's how I'm seeing moving forward with any business that I do, but that's the baseline application to how I want to do that.
That's great. That's great. So I know that you've mentioned your partner a few times. I did just want to, he is a Shaw alum, correct, Seth? So I did just want to, Seth, if you're on the call, thank you for being with us, and obviously a great partnership. So I just wanted to say thank you for your time, for your perspective, Douglas. I know that you like Q&A, which I'm excited about. I know everyone has a lot of questions, so I am going to turn it over to Professor Lanz, and she will share some of the questions gathered.
Thank you.
Douglas, how are you? Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you.
We've got a lot of questions from the students, not surprisingly, but I want to begin with a recommendation that is being made to you from one of our master's students from Sahil. He has a book recommendation for you.
Okay.
He says here that you would probably enjoy this in case it's called My Grandmother's Hands, which I actually already like because I know what your website has looked like with a picture of your hands. So I thought that was really apropos. It's called My Grandmother's Hands, and it's about physically healing from emotional trauma. So Sahil, thanks for the recommendation.
Thank you very much.
You've passed that on. So thank you.
It's very nice of you. Thank you.
We do have a number of questions. You have been to Paris, you have been in Thailand, you've been in New York, and I know among the people who have asked this question, one is our own chef Nick from the school. Why did you go with Italian for MIDA? How did that happen?
I'll try to keep all the answers somewhat concise, because I know there's a lot of questions I don't want to run over time, but and I'm happy to stay on as long as necessary. But as far as Italian, my other business partner, Brian Lesser, he came to me and said, really, what do you like to teach the most? Because we were trying to think of what I should put in that spot, and I was like, I really want to do, I really want to make pasta. And when I came back from Paris, I actually quit a quick stop at a place called Julia, which if everybody doesn't know, it's in Cambridge, Mass. By Mike Pagliarini. He actually trained me when I was at Radius years ago. Before that, I actually stopped at Julia as a stopping point between MIDA, and I was making pasta for him and in the morning and just staying to the afternoon. And I just was like, I think with the right equipment and the right setup, I can teach this, right? Doing it yourself is a lot of work, right? But it was the one thing that I actually like to teach the most. And I said, well, if I like to teach it, I think I can turn it into a business. And that pasta combined with generosity and combined with, also, you have to think about it from a business perspective, as my first launch out and optics into the public. Italian always works for people, right? Pasta, you take anyone in the world, any continent, any culture, you sit them down in front of a bowl of pasta, as opposed to sushi or something else that maybe is a little more foreign. You sit anyone down, even if they don't speak the language, sit them down in front of a bowl of pasta. I guarantee you, without saying anything, they will automatically and intrinsically know what to do with that. And I thought that if I'm going to do a first concept and get the public used to who I am and know who I am, Italian is the easiest vehicle to do that. So that's why I chose Italian.
Fair enough. And for anyone who hasn't dined there yet, that pasta is unbelievable. My girlfriends and I shared the gnocchi a couple months back. And just this week I had the bucatini, which was just, you could tell how fresh this was. So gosh, is that pasta delicious there. Do you cook at home? A few people have asked that, Douglas. Do you cook at home?
I mean, I cook everywhere. I mean, home, a friend's house, on a boat. Like it doesn't, if I'm not cooking, I'm thinking about it, but
okay.
I do with appropriate time. But honestly, my wife is an excellent, phenomenal cook. I wish I could hire her as a cook, because she'd be great, but she's not having that.
That's not going to work.
Not going to work. But yes, I cook
work.
everywhere I go, and I cook at home too. But she does most of the cooking at home now, with my time being stretched.
Okay, excellent. And when you cook at home, do you listen to music?
Yeah, I listen to a lot of Nina Simone, a lot of Rolling Stones, a lot of Coldplay, Don't Kill Me.
No, nothing wrong with that.
Little hip hop, old hip hop. I mean, classical. I love classical music while cooking. That's my favorite. A lot of Mozart. That's my move. Is awesome. A lot of classical.
Okay, excellent. We've got a couple of questions about keeping your identity. This is from one of our students, or one of our undergraduate students, Rachel. What is your favorite way of keeping your identity in your cooking and with the food that you serve? I think you've talked to it a little bit, but is there
identity of what do you think she meant by identity?
In other words, I'm interpreting it as you. How do you put yourself into your menu, into your food? How do we feel a bit of Douglas?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I'm putting myself in the diner's position constantly. And I obviously we can go into in depth, but I have to keep it somewhat concise. When I'm cooking food, I'm mindful of what it's like when someone's sitting down, because you have to understand, cooking the food, tasting it is very different than when I put it on a plate and you eat it at a table. It is a contrasting experience, almost opposite. Both in how your senses are able to interact, the size of the noodle, the size of the piece of meat, the vegetable, whatever it may be. All those things tie in to how I, obviously the portion size, but as far as just conceptually, it just has to speak to you. It's a very interesting question that I don't know if anyone's prepared to really answer, but I try to be as honest as I can with my food, right? I try not to hide behind fads. I don't hide behind trends. I don't hide behind things that don't speak to people. They should touch you, right? They should really come over you. They should almost wash over you, as my grandma used to say. Just let it wash over you whenever I had a problem or whenever I had an issue. She's like, just let that stress just wash over you. It's not gonna, don't let that affect you. And for me, you should close your eyes as soon as you have a bite. You should say, oh my God, and like your knees should get weak. That's how that should affect you. So as long as that's being applied, and that's being kept true throughout my entire career, then I think I'll probably be pretty successful in the food that I cook and how it affects people. So it just has to touch you emotionally. That's my whole piece that I have to keep.
I love that. I love that. Which, by the way, I did close my eyes and go, oh my God, Tuesday night while I was at your restaurant. So
that was an excellent question too, by the way.
Well, similarly, we do have another question that sort of piggybacks off of that, which is culture, right? You've got your own culture in MIDA right now, and now you're expanding to 2 more restaurants. Mm-hmm. How do you plan to keep that culture continuous or consistent in your new places?
A lot of sheer effort. It is very hard to, but enjoyable, to train, give all of your time, give all of your energy, and be consistent with treating everyone as an equal, no matter if they're managed, no matter if they're a busser, to give them that insight, that inspiration, that training, that time, the energy, and now we're talking 2 to 3 restaurants, right? We're talking upwards of 50 people, come from all different backgrounds, all different cultures, all different genders, all different beliefs. It is a lot to fit one, between me and Seth, our culture into their life and then expand them, right? So it's hard to say exactly how, but exactly what we're trying to get to happen. That's really what I kind of want to shift that to, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to essentially inflate them with your belief and with your standards and with your progression and with your how you understand people and how you see people and how you see the guests and how you see themselves and their confidence, their education, their background. It is a lot to put in, and it all comes from Seth and I having understanding, and also a great deal of training around the world and around the country with people who in cultures that maybe not have been the most respectable, right? And how do we turn that into something that we find to be world class, and apply that to people who are just doing this as a quick 6-month pass through. That's why hospitality is so hard. Not because you get experience, not because you're good at what you do, not because I can cook, and not because Seth is excellent at what he does, but we actually have to have that understanding that this is not a forever job for a lot of people, but we're trying to make it that. And we have to get people to understand that that's why you go to college, especially in the hospitality school. This is a 20-year, 30-year gig of just training, right? Of just learning, and then you get to apply that. So once we do that, and we can get someone who's only going to be there for the summer to stay for 2 years, that's our yes, that's what we look. And then they come back as professionals, and they come and dine, and they come and say how that affected you. I mean, that is
that's growing the family.
That's what you live for. That's what you live for.
Well, related to that, and the questions are still coming in. So we have from Peter, who's one of our master students. How did your experience, speaking of cultures, because you just kind of alluded to this a little bit, Douglas, how did your experience in Thailand help you bring the service component to MIDA? Did that experience help you, and how did that vary from other experiences that you were a part of? For example, Paris, the level of service, the sense of service in both places.
Sure. Thailand was, well, I should say Southeast Asia, but Thailand was, oh man, it was remarkable for the food. It was remarkable for the culture, but it was remarkable for the sensibility, right? The sensibility is something I say a lot that I try to apply to MIDA, and that's something that I got honestly from Thailand. That sensibility piece, because I mean, you have to. It's hard to describe because you have to be there. You have to feel that humidity, right? You have to feel what's going on, how you're dressing, the ease in which life is lived by. There was a remarkable amount of respect that communities and people have for not only elders, the food in which they grow, and the temple usually within their community. I'll give a small example and maybe it'll help say the answer. I was in a place called Chumpon, which is essentially almost like the Rome of Thailand. It's halfway in between, it has a lot of culture. It's between the boot, and it's access to all of the islands about 2 to 3 hours off of Thailand, which is an incredible thought. And I got to go to one of those, which is if anything happens to you, there's no communication happening. So, but it also is incredibly freeing feeling. But when you're in a place like that has all these lovely, remarkable personal qualities, like the monks leaving their temple on I think it was a Thursday. They leave their temple for about 2 hours. They walk around the community in unison, and the people of the community go into that temple and give their donations and clean up a bit and straighten out the shoes and dust off the drapes or clean the panes of glass, and cook food for them, so that when they get back, they have all these things done, and it's kind of like upkeep or house cleaning. And when they get back, there's kind of a symbiotic respect and understanding that your house is our house, even though it's an incredibly sacred place of worship. That it's a cycle, right? And it's a cycle of respect. And I wanted to try to find the person that would help me find that cycle and apply it to MIDA in a very ruthless and tough and underpaying and sweaty industry, right? That is very difficult and requires a lot of patience and requires a lot of everything of yourself. And I wanted to try to apply essentially that sensibility, this respect, this overwhelming, repeating, revolving door of respect and kindness and oneness. And that's, I can go on about that forever, but you get what I'm trying to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're just about out of time, but I do want to sort of wrap a few questions into one, and it's sort of a loaded question, but we'll end on this note before I turn it back to Dean Upneja. Clearly, this past year, we've seen all kinds of changes in dining trends, dining attitudes, innovations.
Yeah.
What do you say about sort of the future of where restaurants are going, or what kind of innovative techniques? And like I said, there's a few people, so I'm wrapping up a few thoughts into one question. Sure. But based on this year, where do you think the future of restaurants is going, at least in the short term? Or what have you done differently or innovatively? Or where do you see some innovative steps that might have come out of this year taking hold?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it puts a bigger spotlight on a few things that we talked about today, which is the culture of how restaurants are run. Because if people are home more and they're hungry more and they're looking for recipes more, they're looking to chefs and people in the hospitality industry, obviously with greater frequency. And when you do that, you become a little more attached to whoever you're watching, either by a literary sense or either by through optics.
And there's easier access too, right?
What's that?
There's just easier access to chefs.
Yeah, just easier access in general, to get to know who that person is, as we're doing today. And then you look in on how we run our restaurant, and then you increase your wanting the place that you dine, place that you enjoy your life events, as I mentioned, at places that treat their employees great, right? So that's the one piece, and we hold that in, and that's what we're doing anyway. And we are so thankfully we're on good standing with that, and we're trying to become better and more intertwined with the community. Also, I was going to say, people want to see, and the public wants to see, restaurants that are more involved with the community, not just looking inward toward their employees, but also very much looking outward in a philanthropic way. But it's been very difficult. I can see why restaurants haven't done that for a long time as a whole, is because profits are very low, right? They are the lowest of any business that I can think of in the world. So just based off of the model, and there are ways to change the model and tweak certain things, but at the end of the day, if you want a full service restaurant, there are only there's a very tight constraint on what you can do. But within that, the MIDA team is going to find the best way to move forward with how we train, with how we onboard, with how we develop, and ultimately how we grow. I think that's all within our control. And there are a lot of things that are out of our control, like the public health and everything else that is going on. But we also have, you know, ability to control certain things as people come into the restaurant, and have, you know, ways that people can interact, and ways to keep each other safe during this very strange time. But it's always, restaurants are always strange, right? The industry is always a wacky place. If you walk in from the street, you've never seen a restaurant, you walk into the back of a hotel, of a big casino or a hotel, and you walk into the food and beverage part, you are like, what circus is going on back here? What kind of, this is like a jail with food in it. This is like not great. It's hot, it's overly hot, everyone's in full, like this, in full clothes. It is a tough place. But when we can make it a little easier on people's minds, when we can make it a career for people, when we can make it a place that people actually want to, our employees actually want to come back to day after day, that is the biggest compliment to that. We're going in the right direction. And as far as just to jump off, as far as where restaurants are going, I think they're going to the same place that they were. We still want awesome concepts. We still want, you know, 10-seat tasting counters with 20 courses. We still want comfort food. We still want all the things, Italian, French, sushi, everything. We still want all of that. We just want it in places maybe that it wasn't there before, closer to our house, and we want, and more accessible, and an easier price point that is justified based on what they're serving, not just because they can, right? Not just because you can serve expensive food. You want to serve food that people really resonate to and come back twice a week. So that's just things that attract more to people that are around them, and that involve the community more. So I don't think it will ever die or really change too much to where it's weird. I think it's just going to be something you have to speak up. Also, last thing real quick, if you want your neighborhood to change, or you're in a house or you're in an apartment, pay attention to who, and you have a problem with the restaurants around you, pay attention to your neighborhood square and your neighborhood meetings. You have all the right to say, no, I don't want that here, because there's 3 of them down the street, and I would love to this to happen. And you can speak your mind and have a great deal of power in your neighborhood by just going to certain meetings once a month, and control who isn't in your neighborhood as far as restaurants are concerned.
Yeah. Well, I think on that note, I will always remember how you positioned a kitchen as a place of wonderment, and you just described it that way now too, again, in a very different way. So I love that. We are all so thrilled to have learned so much from you, to get to know you as intimately as you have shared with us. Thank you so much. That was just awesome access. It was just wonderful for us to get to know you, and hopefully dine and pick up gelato, everybody, very, very soon. Kay, thank you on behalf of Shaw, as a famed alum for ours. Thank you for having the conversation with Chef Douglas, to the students who submitted all the questions. Thank you.
I was just gonna say one more thing. If anybody has any questions on this call, if anyone wants to reach out and ask me something about a recipe, about great restaurants, you can reach me at Instagram at Douglas Williams. Always feel free to DM me, or just ask me anything you like. I'm always available, and feel free to just open access. So awesome. and make sure when you do come in, when we are able to give hugs, I'll give you the biggest hug when we're finally able to do that. I need like 100 hugs to make up for this year, as we all do probably. So feel free to always say hello.
We all do. Thank you. And Dean Upneja, I'm not sure if you want to have the last word before we wrap up and close off for the day. Thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome.
I would love to have the last word. Chef, your story is so inspiring. I think it takes a special person to rise through the circumstances that you described. And if there is anything that students should and alumni attending should take away from this, is that it takes heart, it takes grit, it takes hard work, ambition, and a desire to succeed. And I think that is just sort of came through so much of your passion and your heart. So thank you for inspiring our listeners today. And I hope that, all of us are hoping that you will continue to stay engaged. And I heard in your talk that you're interested in teaching as well. So I hope that you stay engaged with our school, and we hope to welcome you again. So thank you, Chef.
Thank you very
Kealoha,
much.
what can I say? We are proud of you. I think all of us are basking in the glow of your success, and we are just looking forward to having you, looking forward to seeing your success in the future as well. So thank you, Leora, Charlie, Stephanie and Mara for all the back-end work that happened to make this a success. And a special thank you to everyone who attended today, spent an hour with us. Please do join us next week for our Leadership Summit with Peter Greenberg and Danny Meyer. And in the meanwhile, I hope you have a lot of opportunities for connections and hugs and conversations over delicious food, particularly the gelato. So, thank you.
Come and get it. Come and get it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Douglas.
Bye-bye.